So many people might wonder how they can write their activity list, and I believe that it's something that's continuously written, continuously improved on while you're doing your applications for college. There are 5 different criteria that's needed for your activity list to be really good. The first one is it needs to be accurate, concise. Second, it needs to be niche. Third, it needs to tell a story. Fourth, it needs to show consistency. And 5, it needs to show your impact. First, before we go into depth of the criteria, you first need to know that there is a difference between Spike and well-rounded students, and this might affect how you approach this activity list. Since the Common App asks you to list your activities in order of importance, if you are a Spike student, you would want the activities that you are a Spike in to be further up on the list. If you're a well-balanced student, this doesn't really matter. You should essentially put your strongest subjects on top and try to find a story, as I will explain later, and explain why one extracurricular might be above another. So there are no shortcuts to creating a good activity list. So what you kind of need to do is to make something called an activity sheet. And essentially what an activity sheet is that it's a 3 A4 or letter sized paper, and on it you list all of your activities. And I know a lot of people would say, oh, I don't have that many activities. You do. It's just you haven't written them correctly. If you're wondering, how do I write it correctly so I have a lot of information? 3 things that we talked about previously. Number 1, the specific wording for you to make it more niche of that subject. Number 2, showing the impact of your ability. And number 3, showing the consistency. So with these 3 things in mind, here, as you can see on this screen, I have the example of my science fair / engineering / computer science. I try to encompass all of this into one blank in order for me to visualize and see, oh, what are the things that I've done and what things can I highlight. Currently, we're not going to translate these into the Common App application. That would be for later on in this video. Right now, we're just worrying about how you can write your activity sheet. So as you can notice, there are 4 different columns here in this graph. The first one says the reach, or that's like your impact. The second one is your years active, or the amount of hours per week. That also might be a factor in considering whether or not your impact was big enough or if you were consistent. The third column is award / position, and the fourth column is additional description / notes. So if you look at the award / position, you can see that I had something very wordy explanations for a very simple award. Why? Because this way I can look at how big the impact is. Instead of just saying I got an honorable mention from this international science fair, I mentioned that I was a finalist and honorable mention from INCOS, which is the International Council on Systems Engineering, instead of saying it's a special award. When you say it's from a special award, in my opinion, it doesn't portray yourself as well as if you say it's from the specific organization that it was from. And as you can see further, I described the competition itself, right? I said there's 1,800 finalists from 75 countries and 600 award-winning finalists, which all that also includes special awards. So in my opinion, I feel like this really encompasses the reach of this project, of this science fair. And you need to do that too in whatever thing that you're trying to do. Even if it's local, if it's state, you need to think about how big this impact is, you know, how competitive it is. Because ultimately, the more competitive an extracurricular is, the more points that you will get when the college admissions officers look at your application. So once you have your activity sheet, how do you translate that to your Common App? Well, you need to translate all of that information into essentially 3 short sentences. And you might ask, why do I have to do all that work when it's just 3 sentences? Well, the reason is because if you don't do all that work, you might miss some details that you otherwise would have noticed if you actually did the activity sheet. So that's why the activity sheet is so important, and I recommend for you to do that. If you don't want to do that, it's also fine. So here's the same example as I previously shown, but instead I'm going to shorten this activity to 3 sentences, which you might wonder, how do you even do that? Well, the easiest way for me to do that is for me to identify which part of the extracurricular has the most impact, has the most consistency, and is the most niche. So as you can see in the activity type, it's of course computer / technology. In the next blank with the position / leadership description, I said developer of visually impaired technology. See, here I could have just said I was like a science fair participant or Intel finalist, but it doesn't make sense because, again, remember, there's the honor section and there's the activity list section. Hi, editing me here. I'm sorry I didn't get this across clearly, but what I was trying to say was don't duplicate if possible. So in both the activity section and the honor section, you can put how good you are, how great you are. That's where you can boast. But when possible, don't repeat this. Like for me, I had to repeat it because I didn't have that many awards in that particular area. But if it is possible for you, do not repeat those areas. I also mentioned here the types of inventions that I have came up with. For example, the 4-inch handheld cane, hands-free sidewalk navigation, and the APP. I believe that these were the most eye-catching for the admissions officers. Like when they look at that, they just say that, oh, okay, this is interesting, this is cool. And you kind of want to do that with any of your activities. And this is what I mean by niche, right? I could have just gone with, I was a science fair participant, but no, I kind of went to the direction of developer for vision impaired technologies, because I know that there's not as many people who are doing that versus doing science fair. But here, we can finally arrive to the point of how you can weave a story, how you can weave a thread. And this is especially for well-balanced people, because in my opinion, if you don't have this thread, people will feel like, what are you doing in a sort of way? Like, what is it that you're doing? What is your goal? You can especially tell a story through number 1, the order of your activities, and number 2, the additional information section, which again, some people skip. I recommend you don't skip, because that's a great place for you to explain any circumstances as well as your activities. If you notice on the comment app, there's the question that we went over 3 times already that was like, include what you accomplished and recognition you received for the activity. Like the question already asks you to list your impact, so you can see how important this impact is. It doesn't matter if you're very dedicated to it. Your impact, how much you actually changed. One other thing I also want to note is that remember the 4th column in the activity sheet. You might wonder also that like what's that for? And that is for your essays, because your activity list and your essays needs to make sense. Like your essay can't be about something particularly random that doesn't have to do with your activity list. They have to relate. There needs to be threads between them. So just watch out. So I used COVID-19 because in actuality, that is what disrupted me from having that consistency throughout my high school. So the way that I grouped it was actually quite interesting, because I grouped it kind of as this outside inside perspective. What I said was, when COVID wasn't there, I did Taekwondo, I did research for the vision impaired and blind, but I wasn't able to continue these when COVID hit, and that's why afterwards I did stuff like piano pedagogy, I created Study Bubbly, I was the student council president of my school, virtual school. And so that's kind of how I explained how I had this diverse set of interests and a diverse set of activities. But continuing on, I here wrote, I have a scientific and artistic mind cultivated from my environment. I focus on my computer science passion, but many activities develop my other skills. For example, my music, and I just listed a piece that I was doing, helps counterbalance my passions in computer science, because there's this common thing that's saying like music and engineering / computer science, it's like yin yang, whatever. Following, I said, as I have to present my project during science fairs, and I just parentheses, I said that I received Broadcom Masters Top 300. Note how I wasn't able to write this previously, because previously they have that limit of saying you have to have your awards and activities be 9th grade and above, and Broadcom Masters is like competitive too, but it's in middle school, it's not in high school. So I just thought I could mention that here, just, you know, brief flex, whatever. And following that, I said the debate skills are handy with answering judge inquiries. So I explained the debate part of my Common App application. For my Taekwondo, I practiced martial arts emphasizing conditions and forms. Note, I didn't say sparring or weapons, because that's also another section. So I wrote here that I practice martial arts emphasizing conditioning and forms, parentheses, choreographed fighting / skills demonstrations, since the admission officers might not know what that is. And I also described one of my lower grades, it was like low A. And I also mentioned another activity, that's actually my 10th activity that I had, and I mentioned that I used to have an impact. Like when I was a kid, I mentioned I was like 13th in the state, and I also mentioned that I transferred my focus to other activities, and besides from that, I also mentioned that I was leading my chess club back in my high school, and when I was in person, just to pay forward my knowledge again, just kind of showing that impact if I could. I know this was kind of a very risky move, because giving up on a certain subject is also showing non-consistency. Now, of course, yes, if you are a spike student, like this doesn't really matter, but if you're a well-balanced student, I don't know yet since I haven't seen the admissions file, but I am betting that having this tie in to everything to show how everything is interconnected and related really gives a better view of who I am as a person and what my goals are in the future. Because remember, every single question, every single activity that they ask you to list, on the bottom it says, do you plan on continuing this activity in college? That is extremely important because they want to know if you are going to say the same, if you're going to continue doing these subjects. Even though, yes, most people do change, they have to look at progress. They have to see some sort of improvement, some sort of award on your end that kind of justifies them accepting you into their college. So it's like a return on investment, if that makes sense. I hope that helped you guys in understanding how I wrote my activity list and how I recommend you guys to write your activity list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love all of you. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.